Okay.
So I'd like to ask you all a question to start. How many of you have said to yourself, I can't X? A lot of you. What are some examples of things that you've told yourself that you can't do?
I always wanted to run a marathon, and I just thought I could never do it.
Okay.
But I actually did.
You actually did it.
You can't succeed at something.
Succeed at something? Okay. What about over here? Anyone else?
Participate in the Olympics.
Participate in the Olympics. Wow. Anyone else? Okay. So my whole life, since basically from the time that I can remember, I kept telling myself the same 3 words. You cannot run. Similar to you. I've never been a runner. In fact, I remember my first gym class that I can remember. I was maybe 10 years old, and I walked in, and my gym teacher said, welcome to gym today. I'm excited to tell you that we are doing a 1-mile timed run. And I remember thinking, a mile? That is the longest run I've ever heard of. I can't run a whole mile without stopping. And I remember all my classmates were lining up, and I'm feeling my heart racing. I probably had a higher heart rate just sitting there and watching everyone kind of line up than I did during the run itself. And I remember standing there getting ready to start running and just being so nervous. So my gym teacher said, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. And everyone started running. And I remember looking at the guy next to me, he just took off, and I'm just, going really slow, sort of on my own. And that was sort of my first, not very fun introduction into running. I felt like I was essentially crawling, while the rest of my classmates were just sprinting ahead of me. So that's kind of been my philosophy my whole life. I found other ways to work out. I played tennis, I've gone on walks, but I've never been able to really run. And then I met my boyfriend about 5 years ago, and he's an avid runner. It was the non-runner meets the runner, and it was just a very funny way to start a relationship. Every day he would wake up and he'd run, 5-10 miles every morning. He runs marathons all the time. And I started to really kind of learn about what it was about running that motivated him. And for him, it wasn't about the running itself. It was really just about setting a goal and sticking to that goal. So every month he, if this gives you any indication of who I'm dating, he sets a goal for himself of how many miles he wants to run in that month, and he plans out his month accordingly. And one day he turned to me and he said, why don't you train for a half marathon? And I said, what are you talking about? I've literally never run maybe more than 2 miles in my whole life. I'm not running a half marathon. But then I decided to think a little bit more about it, and I went home and I started kind of making my pros and cons list. I'm sure you guys have all done that before. And the cons were like, I can't do this, I'm not in good enough shape. But there were some pros. I think the biggest pro that I kind of learned throughout the process is that I had never set a personal goal for myself like that. When it comes to work, I'm really good at getting myself motivated and coming up with metrics that I want to chase after, but I've never set really a personal goal and said, I want to achieve this for me and for not anyone else. And that was really what motivated me. That pro is really what got me to say, okay, I'm going to run a half marathon. I don't care what my time is, I just want to finish it. And that's what I did. And I signed up for a half marathon program called CES, the Chicago Endurance Sports. It's right here in Chicago. And I showed up the first day. And they said, I joined it sort of a beginner group, and it was a little bit of a longer group that got you sort of used to this idea of running. And my first day, they said, we're just going to run a slow 3-mile jog. And I felt good going into it, much calmer than when I was 10 years old in my PE class, because they assured me that it would be slow and we were all beginners. But as I started running, I felt my heart, racing again, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm literally watching the seconds go up. It really felt like every minute was like an hour worth of time. And it was really hard for me. That first run was something that I'll never forget, not in a great way. And this guy on my team, his name was Sean, and he started running next to me and he introduced himself. And he sort of told me about his story, and it turns out that he had lost 100 pounds training for a half marathon about a decade prior. And I got really inspired by his story. And he said, "Girl, you gotta face your fears, like come run next to me." And so I started running next to him, and I stopped looking at my watch, and 1 mile went by, and 2 miles went by, and then we were done with the 3-mile run. Like it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So that was sort of my rhythm. You know, despite how hard my weeks were, if I was exhausted or felt sick, every Saturday I went to the Chicago Endurance Sports site and I ran with the team. And I did this for like a 12-week period, and I finally finished it out. And you know, by the end, I think my nerves subsided a little bit, and I felt better. And I ran with Sean by my side every week. And then it was race day, and that's sort of you know, the day of truth, if you will. It's the biggest day. And I was so nervous. I don't think I slept at all the night before, which is the opposite of what they tell you to do the night before race day. And I showed up and it's raining, which is like the worst. And I was so nervous, and Sean was not running that race, so he was not next to me. And I started running, and I felt the same fear and anxiety coming back. And I'm looking at my watch, and it's raining, and I'm just thinking, I cannot do this. And I remember after mile 7, I actually literally thought, maybe I'll stop. You know, maybe 7 miles is enough. I just thought, okay, you made a goal for yourself. You're going to stick to it. That's sort of what you set out for yourself. And I just kept replaying Sean's words in my head, saying, "Girl, face your fear." So I kept running, and then I saw my boyfriend at the finish line, and that's sort of what motivated me to finish it out. And I finished it, and I crossed the finish line, and it was such an amazing feeling. And when I think back to that experience, it was really a life lesson for me to not be afraid to set personal goals. I really encourage everyone in this room to face your own fears and figure out what it is that you want to achieve. I would also say that the more that you can really dissect what's important to you and why it is that goal is important, the more motivated you'll be to achieve it. And also the more that you can work towards that goal in sizable chunks, the better off you'll be. For me, I didn't go straight from 0 to 13. I started off at 2 miles and 3 miles, and I sort of slowly kind of worked up to that level. So I hope that you all face your fears in the near future.
Thank you, Danielle. It's such a good speech, and it's so much we can learn from. I mean, face the fear and set personal goals, and a lot of